Grim Dawn crossbow bills, yeah.
Hi everybody, welcome to Grim Dawn Crossbow Builds, where all we talk about are crossbow builds for Grim Dawn. We're looking at a pet build today, using the mythical Wretched Crow of Bysmiel crossbow and the goals set. This is a poison pet build with a large menagerie. You can see that half the skill bar is taken up by our pets. I'll just go from right to left here. The first is the Eldritch Talon, which comes from gear. There's our poison dinosaur. Then we also have the Blighted Rift Scourge from gear as well. Those little insectoid guys, they come two at a time. Then the Occultist pets, the Lightning Bird, and the Fire Hound, and the Necromancer pets, Blight Fiend, which we get 2 of, and Skeletons, which we get 8 of. I'm gonna wait to resummon these. So this is our full roster. You can see the screen is pretty crowded. 3 of our skeletons showed up with crossbows, so we currently have 4 crossbows active in our party. Very satisfying for this channel. Let's throw on our Blood of Dreeg and tell our pets to take down one of these dummies. On right click is Curse of Frailty, and on left click is Bone Harvest. So these also summon pets from Devotions and Gear. There's that. So you can see we're doing a ridiculous amount of damage on this build. Let's have a look at our skills. This is a Cabalist, the combination of an Occultist and a Necromancer. Our skill points are fairly evenly distributed between the Occultist and the Necromancer side. Starting with the Occultist, our right-click skill is Curse of Frailty, bound to Shepherd's Call. We just have 1 point on the main skill because we don't really care about physical and bleeding resistance reduction. Just about all of our damage is going to be acid and poison. So we have 1 point in Curse of Frailty and 10 points in Vulnerability. This is what matters more, reducing enemy poison and acid resistance and defensive ability. Since we're a poison damage build, our Blood of Dreeg is hard capped. All of that flat acid damage is well utilized by all of our pets. And we have a few points in Aspect of the Guardian, mainly to max out our poison and acid resistance. You could put more points in here if you like. This helps both you and your pets. Summon Familiar has a few points in it. We're mainly using it for its aura, Storm Spirit, which gives us flat elemental damage and elemental resistance. This is fully converted to acid and poison damage. We've also got 1 point in its other modifiers, Mend Flesh for a little bit of healing, and Lightning Strike to make the bird hit a little harder. Bonds of Bysmiel and Manipulation are a little bit over the soft cap, with the aura bound to Giant's Blood. Our Hellhound has a few points in it, and each of its modifiers has 1 point. 1 in Ember Claw, boosted to 8. 1 in Hellfire, also at 8. And 1 in Infernal Breath, which is sitting at 7 points. If you've ever played with pet builds, you've probably noticed it's impossible to max out all your pets and all their modifiers. But when you have a certain critical mass, even pets with just a few skill points invested in them can function well as part of a group and they don't really die very much. Let's take a look at the Necromancer side. We have 1 point in Bone Harvest, which is bound to Bysmiel's command. That gives us the Eldritch Hound pet. 1 point in Dread, and 8 points in Soul Harvest because the vitality damage on the pets gets converted to acid damage. Our skeletons are a little above the soft cap, and they are bound to Rumor so that their attacks give poison and acid resistance reduction. We have a bunch of points in Undead Legion to raise our summon limit to 8, and Will of the Crypt is also above the soft cap because the vitality is converted to acid damage and it increases their armor quite a bit. The skeletons basically never die on this build unless you're fighting a celestial boss. Blight Fiend is also a smidge above the soft cap, bound to acid spray for extra resistance reduction. And we have a good investment in its modifiers. Rotting Fumes gives a healthy heap of poison damage and some defensive bonuses. And Blight Burst gives a heap of acid damage and confusion. Our exclusive aura is Master of Death, which gives our pets extra acid damage, offensive ability, and vitality and chaos resistance. On the bottom line, we have 1 point in Spectral Binding for some extra health, and 1 point in Spectral Wrath to reduce enemy attack speed. These are optional. Any points we had left over went into Call of the Grave, which gives our pets a nice damage boost for 10 seconds. Most necromancers will take Mark of Torment, but it's kind of optional in this case because you should be hiding behind your pets. Let's talk about our devotions. The devotion choices on this build are very simple. We're just going for tier 1 and 2 constellations. We don't have any big tier 3 goals that we're working towards. And honestly, many of the most useful constellations for pet builds are very low level. So when you're leveling this build, I would start with a point in purple at the crossroads to take the Shepherd's Crook. Then a point in red, so you could take the Jackal up here. Also gives pet bonuses. Then a point in green to take the Hawk, which gives extra offensive ability for your pets. When you have these 3 constellations active, you're off to the races. And you can start taking some of the bigger ones down here. The Manticore is strongly recommended for this build. It supports poison pets, and it has a really nice proc. This means that the Blight Fiend's attack will have a bunch of extra acid and poison damage, and also give extra resistance reduction. Bysmiel's Bonds also has red and green affinity requirements, and gives another great proc, an extra pet, which already comes with poison damage, you don't have to convert it. This helps a lot in the early game. In the late game you don't really need it because you already have a lot of pets, but it's still nice to have. These 2 constellations on the bottom left, Murmur and Behemoth, require blue devotion points, so that means going up to the northeast of the map and taking some of the pet devotions that give blue affinity points. I chose the Stag even though it's geared towards physical damage on pets because it helped me cap my pet's pierce resistance. The Hound and the Panther would also be good choices that would get you blue points. I had points in the Panther, which I used to take the Staff of Ratosh. The staff mainly supports ether pets, but it has good generic bonuses on it as well. With those 6 blue points, you can go back down to the bottom and pick up Murmur. This is quite essential for the build for acid resistance reduction, and I recommend binding it to raise skeletons because it has a chance to go off on each of their attacks. Taking the Behemoth should help your survivability and also your pet's survivability with extra health and extra regen. On the bottom right, we've also taken a bunch of purple constellations with pet bonuses. Empty Throne gives great resistances for pets and for your character. Wolverine also grants pet resistances and defensive ability. And Typhos, the Jailer of Souls, is full of good stuff, with stun resistance and a lot of extra generic damage for your pets. With the skill points that I had left over, I took a couple random things at the top of the map. 1 point in the Lion for extra pet health, and 1 last point in Ulo, the Keeper of the Waters, just because I was a little short on elemental resistance for my pets. Let's talk about our gear. Naturally, we're using a crossbow on this build, and this one's really an oddball. It's called the Mythical Wretched Crow of Bysmiel, and it synergizes in quite a lovely way with the goals set. So we have the full goals set on this character along with this weapon. Of course, we don't care about the weapon damage, we're not using that, but it does give a big chunk of health, skill cooldown reduction, which applies to our skeletons and our Blight Fiend, and +2 to all occultist skills, which pumps up the levels of our Familiar and our Hellhound, as well as our Bonds of Bysmiel. The main reason to use this weapon is the fantastic poison damage. A flat 60 poison damage for all pets and big percentage bonuses for all of it. This helps us get the most out of our goals set. This is a mythical level pet set which was nerfed a little bit in the last patch, but it's still very powerful. It's primarily intended for a ritualist, which is the combination of a necromancer and a shaman, but it also gives extra poison pets and big bonuses to their damage. So it's working quite well for us as a Cabalist. When you complete the full set, you get an extra Blight Fiend, which is a big deal, and also the Eldritch Talon Poison Dinosaur. This chest piece is craftable, and the recipe's pretty cheap, so if you find the blueprint, you can craft this chest piece and make the whole set based off of that. The other pieces are Goal's Mantle in the shoulder slot, Goal's Reach in the glove slot. Whenever you get the gloves, they also give you an extra pet on their own, and also extra range to Bone Harvest, which can be handy. The last piece of the set is the metal, Goal's Mark, which mostly benefits the Blight Fiend, with over 10,000 poison damage, additional threat level, and all vitality converted to acid damage. For our rings, we have 2 of Mythical Yugal's Ichor. These are probably the best in slot rings for any poison pet build, and they include physical to acid damage conversion for the pets. Our helm is the Spectral Crown, which is a monster infrequent from a side area in the Blood Grove. You can get one to level with on your first pass through of the area, and it is tailor-made for a Cabalist, with bonuses to raise skeletons, summon familiar, and bonds of Bysmiel. For me, a big selling point for this helm was the 6% physical resistance on the Bonds of Bysmiel aura, because the new patch has made physical resistance much harder to come by. Another strong contender for the helm slot is the Mythical Circlet of the Great Serpent, which also supports poison pets and the Blight Fiend. Our amulet is the Mythical Blight Shard, which gives 2 extra poison pets and full elemental to acid damage conversion. This really helps us because it means that the Storm Spirit aura from our Summon Familiar is giving all of our pets extra acid damage. Our boots are Mythical Fiend Flesh Greaves. There are several good options for this slot, but this one also gives you a defensive proc for your character. If you're playing hardcore or just if you don't like dying, I strongly recommend these. The defensive proc is great. It gives a flat 12,000 damage absorption, which is probably going to keep you alive pretty well. Of course, this character rarely gets hit, so you're free to try other things in this slot if you like. Our belt is the Mythical Shadow Fiend's Cord, which actually proved to be the hardest piece of gear to find of this entire setup. This will depend on your luck, of course, but this one is a random drop. It gives +1 to all Necromancer and Occultist skills, and essential pierce resistance for our pets. Our relic is Mogdrogan's Ardor, which is arguably the best pet relic, giving +1 to all skills and easily converted physical damage to our pets. And finally, our pants are Mythical Wildshorn Leggards. These work beautifully with poison pets, giving them a bunch of retaliation damage in addition to their normal attacks. Let's talk about leveling. I found this character very, very easy to level. The skeletons are strong from the get-go, and there are so many good gear choices for a pet build like this. I'll just give a few options for things you can use along the way. The lowest level piece of gear here is Carver's Conjuring Bone, which comes from a corpse in the Sodden Hollow. You can look up the location on Grim Tools. The lowest level version only requires level 8, and it's a great way to start any pet build. It gives you a pet right off the bat. When you get to Act 2 with this character, I strongly recommend doing all of the Rover quests, because the Rovers have great pet gear. Starting at level 35 and a respected reputation, you can put on a chest armor, a shoulder piece, a wand, and an offhand that are all really good for pets. They also sell a pretty good pet amulet for a conjurer, which also works for us. And finally, the Rovers have the recipe for the Rawari Waistguard, which gives +1 to all occultist skills, and it can roll with pet affixes. Devil's Crossing, your starting faction, sells a very nice ring for a Cabalist, the Devil's War Seal. with bonuses to Bonds of Bysmiel and Call of the Grave. And if you get lucky, you might come across the normal version of a Marrow Band, which supports Hellhound and Skeletons. When you get to the Blood Grove, try to rescue the witch in the southeast, who is tied to a stake, because if you do, she'll give you the witch's effigy, which is a good low-level offhand for pets. And whenever you get to Ugdenbog, the Wendigo Gaze is a lovely monster infrequent, which gives you an extra skeleton, very, very helpful in the mid-game. Also in the mid-game, you might pick up something like this, the lower level versions of Touch of Command, which are very good generic pet gloves. For pants, I recommend doing the Hidden Path quest, which will get you a pair of Bysmiel Sect Leggards, which come with pet bonuses. With all of this gear, as well as the constellations I mentioned, you should get to the endgame really easily. I got the Ravager already earlier, but I'll do it again for the video. Oh, it's this totem.